Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to demonstrate for you how to do our vintage lattice stitch. The vintage lattice stitch is a fun, easy 2-needle project, and it's working with a bunch of our new beads. For this project, you're going to need 3mm Czech glass fire polished rounds, or you could use crystals, or you could even switch these out for Miyuki seed bead drops. But I'm using the 3mm crystal fire polished rounds, and these are in an extra light sapphire color. You're also going to be using Rullas, 11s, and SuperDuos. I'm using jet copper in Rullas, galvanized Smoky Mauve in 11s, and crystal baby blue in my SuperDuos. The other thing I'm using is Montees. These are size 12 Montees, and this is the Alexandrite color of the Montees. You will also need 2 English beading needles. I use size 10 English beading needles. In addition to that, you'll need some thread. I'm using 0.008 wildfire beading thread. You could use 0.006 as well. And because of my colors and I have some blue in it, I'm using the green color, as well as a clasp for your project. And that's what you're going to need in order to build this vintage lattice stitch. So we're getting ready to start the bracelet, and what I've done, because it's a 2-needle class, usually what I like to do is attach my clasp first whenever I'm using 2 needles, because it's really easy to do. So what I've done is I've strung 4 seed beads, my toggle loop, and 4 seed beads onto my thread and dropped them down to the middle of a very long piece of thread. This is a wingspan's worth of thread, so it's going to be right about 5 feet. And you will most likely need to tie on more thread, so we'll tackle that when we get to it. And I'm going to start out my pattern. So to start out, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start out by crisscrossing through one of my 3mm Czech glass beads. And that's going to pull my clasp kind of in place. I'm pulling my thread. I have a lot of thread on here, so bear with me. And I pull my thread through, and what that does is that's going to make a nice little circle loop for my clasp to sit in. And now I'm going to get ready to go with my project. This is going to get very repetitive, and at the very start, we're only actually going to be using the SuperDuos, the 11s, and the Montees. The 3mm and the Rullas, these two will come in later on in play. So we're going to push those kind of off to the side, and we're going to be working just with our SuperDuos, our 11s, and our Montees. We're going to start out by putting 1 11 on each needle, 1 SuperDuo on each needle, 1 11 again on each needle. So the pattern is 11, SuperDuo, 11, and this is just going to be for the start here. And we're going to let that drop down next to our beads. So we have that on there. Next, we're going to add another SuperDuo on each side. Let that drop down. And then to create my first set, I'm going to take my Montee here, and I'm going to crisscross through the back. So one needle is going to go, if you look on the back of the Montees, they have that little X. One needle is going through one way, and then one needle is going to go through the other way. So I'm crossing through on this side, and it's going this other way. And once I have that through, I'm going to pull nice and tight. And then what that's going to do is just get that rounded out. You can look at it here. It pulls nice and tight, and it rounds out the pattern. Just get that pattern nice and rounded out. And I'm going to repeat. Whenever you're on the sides of the Montee, you're going to add a SuperDuo on each needle. Then you're going to add your 11 on each needle. And then you're going to add your SuperDuo on each. Let them drop down. And you're getting ready then to add another Montee. And you're going to add your Montees right along the back. The Montees go on and crisscross right along the back. And that's going to be your continued pattern throughout this whole center base of this bracelet. So I've gotten a little bit further in my bracelet here, and just to repeat, I'm doing my patterns of SuperDuo, seed bead SuperDuo on each needle. One set on the right, one set on the left. I'm letting them drop down next to my last Montee, and then I'm going to pick up another Montee. The Montees, one thing you do want to make sure of as you continue on your stitch is that the Montees are all facing the same direction. So I'm sharing that hole in the back there. I'm going one through one way, one through the other way, getting that cross section. And the Montees have a tendency to want to flip. So you want to put it on one side, make sure that it's facing the correct way, and then you're able to put your needle in the second side. And when you give a little pull then, you'll make sure that your Montee is facing the correct way. But I'm just going to continue doing the same stitch, adding the SuperDuo Seed Beads SuperDuo, and then crossing through a Montee the whole length of my bracelet. So I'm done here with my last Montee and crossing through there. So now what I'm going to show is how to add the clasp on the other side. So when you get your last Montee on, what you're going to want to do is basically repeat the start of the bracelet here. And I'm going to finish with one of my repeat sets of my SuperDuo Seed Beads SuperDuo on each side of my needles. And then what I'm going to do is add another seed bead on each side. So I have my SuperDuo, my seed bead, my SuperDuo, and then followed by a seed bead. I let them drop down next to my last Montee. I'm going to pick up one of my 3mm Czech glass beads. I pick that up with my needle, one going from right to left, and the other needle going from left to right through the bead. I give a nice tight pull to get that down right next to the last beads. And then I'm going to create a loop just like I did on this side. I'm going to start with my right hand needle and I'm going to mimic the other side. So I'm going to do 4 beads, then my clasp, then 4 more beads. I'm going to take that same needle, so I'm not working with the left at all right now, I'm just working with the right, and I'm going to go through that 3mm Czech glass bead again in a rounded form. So it's coming out on the right and I'm going into the left. Pull nice and tight, and that's going to get me my toggle bar there. I'm going to then take the piece of left on the left needle and I'm going to reinforce this whole thing by going back through it again. I want to go back through it at least 2 times and circle around. Anytime I have a clasp going right onto thread and not using a wire protector or anything else, I always make sure that I'm reinforcing that thread. Going back through that Czech glass bead as well as all the seed beads. Give a nice pull, and that's going to tighten that whole thing up on each side. So I've gone back through 2 times. If you want and you're using a thinner thread, you're more than welcome to go back through there another time. That's up to you. But now I'm going to start coming back my project and adding my next piece. So when I'm looking here at this first piece, we've got the SuperDuos, the Montees, and the 11s on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to stitch and we're going to add our Rullas. So I'm going to pick up my Rullas and I'm going to dump some out. I'm going to also be using some of my 11-0s just at the start. I'm going to pick up my needle that's on the right and I'm going to add 3 seed beads onto, or I'm sorry, 2 seed beads onto my needle. They're going to lay right next to my SuperDuo, and I'm going to go back through, I'm going through the second hole of the first SuperDuo. I'm going through the top hole towards the start of the bracelet. Once I get through that, I go on to my Rullas, and I'm going to be adding my Rullas one at a time. So I add a Rulla, and I'm going to stitch through the next hole of the SuperDuo. Pull nice and tight, and the Rulla is just going to sit right there. In between, I'm going to sew every other basically that I'm adding my Rulla. So if you can see here, at every point in between the Montees, your SuperDuos are going to sit nice and close. That's where you're going to stitch through 2. You're adding your Rullas where they sit a little bit wider apart. Your Rullas are going to sit right on top of one of the seed beads. So the Rulla gets added, and then I'm stitching through 2 of my SuperDuos. Bring my needle out, and then I'm going to do another Rulla bead. And I'm just going to continue down the line, adding a Rulla, sewing through 2 SuperDuos the whole way on the right hand side, and then I'm going to come back on the left, add my 2 seed beads, and do the same thing on the left hand side. So just to show you here, I've added all of my rullas to the one side, and now I'm picking up my other needle, adding 2 seed beads, sewing through that top hole of the first SuperDuo, down towards the toggle loop, and I'm going to start adding my rullas just like I did to the first side. I'm going to add the rulla, sew through 2 of my SuperDuo beads, pull, and then add another rulla. And again, we're just continuing this the whole length of the bracelet until we get to the very end. And when we get to the very end, I'll show you how we step up to the next section of that bracelet. I'm at the end of adding my rullas to my bracelet, so I've added them the whole length of the bracelet. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add 2 seed beads, just like I did at the start of this end. I added the 2 seed beads and then went into the top hole of my SuperDuo. Because I'm coming out of the top hole on this side, I'm going to add 2 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to sew through that check glass bead there. It's the end. I'm going to do that on the right, and I'm also going to do it at the left here. And sew through. And that's going to get me that whole row of my rullas done. So I'm actually done with my rullas now, and I'm going to go back to my SuperDuos. When I'm coming out the check glass bead right here, I'm actually going to take my needle and sew through those 2 seed beads that I just put on. So I'm sewing those through with the opposite needle basically on each side. And that's going to bring my needle out towards the end of the rulla. And just like the SuperDuos, the rullas have 2 holes. So it's going to allow me to pick up further here on the rullas. It's going to let me pick up that second hole. For this step, what we're doing is we're adding the SuperDuos now in between the rullas. So we're kind of mimicking what we did first. Last time we were adding the rullas in between the SuperDuos. Now we're going to add the SuperDuos in between the rullas. So to start out, I'm going to actually be adding 3 of my 11/0 seed beads on each needle. I'm going to sew through the top hole of my Rulla bead. And then when I'm coming out my rulla, what I'm going to do is add 2 SuperDuos. And I'm going to do this both down the right side and down the left. So I'm adding 2 SuperDuos in between each Rulla bead. So 2 SuperDuos get added, sew through a rulla, 2 more SuperDuos. And I'm doing this the whole length of the bracelet. Just picking it up, adding adding SuperDuos, sewing through rullas. So I'm going to continue this the whole way on this right side, and then I'm going to switch over and I'm going to do it the whole way down on the left side. So I'm at the end of adding these SuperDuos, and again I've added them up the right and up the left. And when I get to the end of the bracelet, what I want to do is mimic the start. So I'm going to take 3 seed beads, put them on my needle, on the right needle right now. I'm going to go sew through the 2 seed beads that are here on the end, sew through the check glass bead, and I'm sewing over through that check glass bead. I'm going to do the same thing now on the left, but I'm picking up my 3 seed beads, sewing through the 2 beads that are already there on the side here, and then I'm going to sew through that check glass bead. This is going to be our last pass down the bracelet, so we're going back one more time. And what I want to do, just to reinforce this clasp a little bit, is I'm actually going to take my thread that's on the right hand side now, and I'm going to go up through the clasp one more time. So I'm going through all the seed beads, through the clasp, down the seed beads, and starting to get a tight fit there. And then, once I do that, I'm going to bring it back through that check glass bead, and then also back through those 5 seed beads that I have there on the side. So at the same time I'm bringing it back through the check glass, I'm also going to bring it back through those 5 seed beads. And it's nice and tight in there, and it need to kind of force it through. Sometimes if you need help too, you can kind of poke your needle down into your bead mat and press up and force it through that bead. And if you need to, you can also take pliers to pull it through if it gets stuck. So I'm going to grab my pliers here and just give a little yank on my needle to get it through. So I'm through that bead now. And what I'm going to do then is continue down these seed beads, and we're going to get ready to add our last row on the sides. So now that I've come out both of my seed beads here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add more seed beads, because each time we need to get to the next hole, we're adding more seed beads on the project. This last row, if you look at the example here, all we're going to be adding is our check glass and our 11-0 seed beads. So I have them in a little pile here. To start, I'm going to add 3 11-0 seed beads, and then I'm going to go to the top hole of my first SuperDuo bead. And again, everything that I do down this right side, I'm also going to pick up the left needle then and do down the left. In between the SuperDuos goes a check glass bead, a 3mm bead. And I'm going to sew from the first SuperDuo into the second SuperDuo. Give a nice tight pull. After that, I'm going to add an 11-0. So the pattern's always going to be SuperDuo, 3mm, SuperDuo, 11-0. And I'm just going to continue alternating the whole way down this side to get the sides of the bracelet done. And what you'll notice is that the 11-0s are actually going to sit right on top of the Rulla beads. So when you're looking, the 11-0s sit right on top of the Rullas, and the check glass beads are going to sit in between the SuperDuos in that V style, just like in the center of the Montee. So I'm going to continue doing this alternating pattern the whole way down the right, and then we're going to pick up and do the whole way down the left. So I've gone down the one side, and I'm just leaving it here at the end, and I'm starting again on the other side. I've started again with the 3 seed beads, and I'm going in then and filling in with my 4mm check glass, or my 3mm check glass, as well as my 11-0 seed beads, sewing right down the line to get this nice line and linear effect. I've actually run out of thread on this other side, and since I have plenty on the original side that I added my 11s and my check glass to, I'm going to use that to come down on the side. That way I don't need to add extra thread. So I'm here at the top, and what I'm going to do is add 3 seed beads and go along that seed bead line again. Just kind of wiggle it in there because it's getting tight. And I'm going to bring it right over, reinforce the clasp, go up, come down, and keep going then. And use the same thread to keep going to finish up my little edges here with my beads on the edge. So all I've done to finish my bracelet off was go down the other side and tie a knot off right at the end there, and you get a really nice effect. One thing that you really want to make sure of is that you're not pulling your beads on your rows too tight, because what you're going to have is you're going to have a chipping kind of effect, that it's going in and out because the SuperDuos are getting pulled too tight. On this half of the bracelet, it's really nice, it's loose, the thread's really great. On this half, it was pulled a little bit too tight. We had 2 people working on the bracelet, and just to show you the difference of the tension. So this is one of those bracelets where you want to make sure not to pull too tight. Let it kind of loose, let it hang, and you'll get this nice flat effect that looks great on the wrist, and it has those little Montees in the center that sparkle like crazy. You can use other beads in the center too. You don't need to use Montees. Most recently, I made it just with 6-0s in the middle, 6-0 seed beads, just for a variety. You can also use gemstones in the middle, and instead of doing that crisscross pattern, you can just take your needles both up through that same bead, or you can crisscross through either one. So hopefully you have some fun making this bracelet, and if you get a chance, check out our other YouTube videos. Also go online to PotomacBeads.com, check out our locations page, and if you get a chance, visit us in one of our stores. We'd love to see you. So thanks a lot for watching, and have a great rest of your day.